Hey everyone, welcome back to the YOUnify podcast. My name is Brandyn Keating. I'm the CEO and co-founder of YOUnify, a nonprofit helping you flourish and thrive. And I'm also the host of our podcast. I'm really excited about our episode today. I suspect that if you are looking at the news or online or just living your life and talking to people, you've noticed the polarization in our country and might be thinking that our government's starting to seem a little bit like a dumpster fire, if that's not too much to say, or just a little bit stuck. So I'm really excited to be chatting with our guest, Keith Allred, today, because underneath the surface of everything that we're hearing and feeling about polarization and a dysfunctional government, Keith and his organization, the National Institute for Civil Discourse, and his project, Common Sense American, have managed to bring everyday people together across differences in order to pass legislation. So we are going to dig into that and how that's happening. Keith has over 2 decades of experience that spans business and academia. He's been a professor at Columbia University and subsequently at the Harvard Kennedy School, where he taught conflict resolution. Pretty significant for these times. And for 7 years, he's been the executive director of the National Institute for Civil Discourse. He's also a 5th generation Idahoan and grew up spending his summers working on a ranch. Keith, welcome. I'm so delighted to have you here today.
It's great to be with you, Brandyn.
So, Keith, before we dig into all of the amazing work that you are doing with the National Institute for Civil Discourse, I would love to allow the viewers and listeners to just learn a little bit more about you. So we know that you grew up in Idaho. Could you share a little more with us about what young Keith was like and sort of how you became the Keith that you are today?
Yeah, it's a good thing my parents aren't here to question. I think I was a little bit of a tough kid, especially teenager to parent. I just have always kind of had a flair for the bold. I wanted to do big, epic things. So I'll give you one example. I used to have buddies sleep over. We'd sleep out under the stars on the lawn when I was like 11, 12 years old, and we'd push my dad's VW Bug to the end of the street and drive it to Nevada and back, just because I thought that.
Just because.
Yeah. So I was a little bit bold that way, but that growing up in the West really contributed to that. When I was 16, cattle market had plummeted, and my grandpa asked me to come run our 1,200 acre, 400 head cattle ranch on my own. And so
wow,
it just kind of, I don't know, it gave me quite a bit of confidence in a sort of bold problem solving sense. Like I was often just, would run across really crazy problems and there was no one to turn to. And at 16 had to figure out, okay, what are you going to do about it? So I think I've always had sort of confidence to kind of look at tough problems and say, there's a solution here. Let's find it.
Incredible. I suspect that is serving you well in your current role. Is there something for people who know you through your professional life or who are going to get to know you, your professional life today on the podcast, something that might surprise them about you? Is there a hidden talent or some curious thing about Keith?
Well, drawing on the early experience of my life. So I finished 8th in the world in the National Cutting Horse Association in 2017. So that's where you ride a horse into a herd of cows and you separate or cut the cow out from the herd, and you have to keep the cow from getting back into it. And so I got pretty into that and finished 8th in the world in 2017.
So no stranger to excelling at unique challenges, shall we say. Fantastic. So here at YOUnify, we think a lot about human flourishing and how can we all flourish and thrive. And wondering, just for you as a person, Keith, is there anything for you right now that's challenging your flourishing and something maybe that's helping you flourish and thrive?
You mean besides trying to work on polarization in Congress? Yeah, it just,
You might hit both sides of the coin with that one, in fact. Yeah.
I'll joke if I'm meeting somebody new, I'll say, they'll say, what do you do? And I say, well, my job is to get Republicans and Democrats in Congress to work together while you see what a good job I've been doing. And it's just, it's bitter and tough there. And, we play a role of trying to have each side be able to engage a little more constructively. And it takes a lot of energy. I get to the end of Friday and the tanks are pretty low.
I can imagine that would be true. Yeah. So how do you refuel?
Yeah, I've taken to working out quite a bit. It used to be that I'd, ride a horse, but we gave up the horse. We moved from Idaho here. And so I've gotten a little nerdy about working out. So I've had glucose monitors and scales that measure body fat and stuff. And so it's that kind of, seeing if I can pull the levers and increase the fitness a little bit within the kind of limited time and energy that I have. So that really does give me a little more energy and restoring if I do that.
Fantastic. Yeah. And true to personality. One of my favorite things about you, having worked with you before, is your attention to actually making a concrete change in the world. And I can see that is true also with your workouts. You want to measure the impact. So getting into a little bit of this gnarly challenge that we're here to talk about today, the polarization in the country, the dysfunction in government. Is it naive for people to think that in this context, we can bring regular people, members of Congress together across partisan lines to get things done?
Yeah, let me start on the side of how reasonable I think it is for people to have that question, to feel like that might be.
Yeah.
There's a lot of evidence to support that. And I think a lot of us have kind of a sinking feeling in our stomach that, politics have always been kind of nasty and never a beautiful, elegant thing. But, a sense that something is fundamentally different now, that is more fundamentally wrong, and kind of a creeping doubt of, can we keep this thing going? And that's not just the impressions, but if you look at the formal research, in some ways it might even be worse than people think. So, for example, just really compelling research showing that Congress is quantifiably the most polarized along party lines that it's been ever in our history, ever.
Wow. So people aren't imagining it.
Yeah. So people aren't imagining it. So I think the challenges are genuinely serious. And I think of it as a polarization wildfire threatening to burn down American democracy. So first, I just want to acknowledge that sinking feeling in the stomach, a sense of, hey, getting to bipartisan problem solving might be naive. There's real basis for that. But there are a number of hidden things that are not obvious to our view that flips that around. In fact, not only changes it and modifies it, but flips it. So I'd say bipartisanship is really the only realistic way of really doing lasting problem solving, finding solutions that will have a lasting impact. The notion that you can make big changes in this country on a partisan basis, that's the foolish and naive notion. And there's a number of reasons for that, but the empirical evidence is there, and happy to kind of go into it. But the experience is, if you look at, well, not just what's on the news or your social media feeds each day, but look at the record of legislation actually passing. So over the last 10 years, there's been 9 major pieces of legislation pass. 2 on a narrow partisan basis, the first Trump tax cut, and then the big, beautiful bill. 1 on a narrow Democratic basis, that was the Biden Inflation Act. But 6 that have been passed on broad bipartisan bases. And all 6 of those driven by the Senate bipartisan group that has been led by Senators Collins and Manchin for most of that time and is now being led by Senators Murkowski and Bennett. They've accounted for more legislation than the White House, the Speaker's office, or the Senate Majority Leader's office, even when one party controlled all 3 combined. Those entities have not been where the center of American policy making has been, and it has been bipartisan gangs in the Senate. So if something lasting is happening in Congress, it's on a bipartisan basis because we have highly separated powers and very narrow partisan majorities. And so it's just practically the only way you actually get things done. So, on your news, you're going to see they're going to really pay attention to the partisan food fight, and your social media will. But as soon as you see that there's a partisan food fight on something, there's your first indication it's likely not going anywhere because it's going to run into separation of powers and narrow partisan majorities. And the kind of slow, more deliberative, often behind the scenes work of a bipartisan nature doesn't get nearly the attention. But if you look at the actual consequences, the actual decision making in Congress and where the meaningful changes happen, it's driven by bipartisanship. It's really the only realistic way to make changes in our country.
So the dysfunction is there, but underneath the surface of that, if we want to unstick change that can affect people's daily lives, then we need to focus into how we can build those bipartisan coalitions. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd say that's one key is that we got to understand Congress and how our system's designed and realize that bipartisanship is the only realistic way. Now, there's obviously huge obstacles still to getting things done in a bipartisan way. So I think the second key to getting the government to function the way we want it to, the way it's intended to, is we've got to get everyday citizens engaged. And one of the assets there is for fighting this polarization wildfire is that everyday citizens aren't nearly as divided on the issues as people think they are. Our elected officials are, the really politically active citizens are very divided on the issues, but not the kind of everyday Republicans and Democrats are not nearly as far apart as they think they are, as most of us think they are. And so to kind of empower those few remaining members of Congress that are willing to work together across the aisle, they're hearing mostly from the extremes.
Right.
And it is tough work what they're doing. And so mobilizing everyday citizens around finding where do we agree across the divide and then engaging Congress with those results in a powerful way, it is a way for us to bolster those folks in the center who are having the outsized impact.
And of course, revealing that common ground that is often hidden is near and dear to our hearts and part and parcel of our work here in YOUnify. So delighted to hear you say that. And through your Common Sense American program, you have actually done this successfully 4 times, right? You're 4 for 4. That's a pretty good average there, Keith. And so this is not theoretical. This is not just an idea that you've had. This is something that you've done in real life successfully 4 times in recent history. So let's talk about how that has worked. Can you tell folks a little bit about what is Common Sense American, and then we'll get into some of the keys to success there.
Yeah. So Common Sense American is a program at the flagship program at the National Institute for Civil Discourse. We have 89,000 Americans who have joined us. It's growing at about 1,500 Americans per month. Balanced left, right, and center, every state in the country. And we have a kind of efficient and powerful model for identifying where is there that grassroots agreement across the divides, and then an powerful model for how we engage Congress with those results.
And so 89,000, that's impressive. If I'm sitting listening right now and I'm like, well, I'd like to join, how do I do it?
Yeah, just go to the website, commonsenseamerican.org. So every American citizen is invited to join. And it's, we'll ask you to make one primary commitment, and that is that you'll be willing to spend an hour per year reviewing a policy brief. So there's 4 steps, and you'll see this on the website. There's 4 steps that we take together, with these 89,000 Americans. So first, we pick one issue per year to work on. Second, we develop a really thorough policy brief on that question. And these are policy briefs, not position papers. So we're not trying to tell the American people what the right answer is. And the key part of the brief is that we make the strongest case for and against each policy proposal included in the brief. Then the third step is every member has committed that hour per year to reviewing the brief. So they read the arguments for and against each of those proposals, and then they indicate whether they support or oppose it. And then fourth, we engage Congress with the results, particularly where we found really strong bipartisan agreement. Usually, we'll find some elements that will have, north of 75 or 80% support, and you can hardly, it varies very little between Republicans and Democrats how much they support it. And so we have state ambassadors in every state who help.
All 50 states.
In all 50 states.
Amazing, yeah.
Schedule and then conduct those briefings in Congress with our results. So on our fourth victory, we briefed 320 congressional offices on our results. We have a pretty muscular way of engaging Congress.
Fantastic. Okay, so I sign up, I get the policy brief. What if I'm not a policy wonk? What if I've never read a policy brief before? Can I participate?
They are written for you. That it is
fantastic.
Everyday citizens. We're in the middle of writing, this year's policy brief. I'll tell you, I kick myself sometimes for having this idea because writing these policy briefs is a real pain. So we really work with the leading national experts in the country. We really get a deep understanding of the policy issues, but then we work super hard to kind of come back from all the complexity and be able to summarize it and craft it for everyday Americans, assuming you don't know anything about this topic before you start reading the brief. And at the end of an hour, you'll start reading the brief. I had one senator from Louisiana, Bill Cassidy, on one of our issues as I was sharing the results with him. And he was a particular expert on this topic. And he said, I think your members are more knowledgeable and insightful on this issue than most members of Congress and their staff. He says, I have no idea how you got thousands of Americans that well informed, but they really grasp this issue deeply. And so
it's the brief in plain language.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So we are going to have all of the links down below if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening across all of our social media. We will have the links to get connected with Common Sense American if you want to sign up. And if you're enjoying the podcast, if you think you know somebody who might enjoy it or think that other people should hear this message, we really invite you to click that subscribe button, to like, to comment, let us know what you think, to share. Any interaction really helps this message get to more eyeballs. And of course, we'll also have the links for our Leadership for Flourishing book and our Write the Future campaign, where you can get involved locally to help craft and take action steps on the local future on the hopeful future, in the description and in the links across social media as well. So invite everybody to do that. And Keith, you with this bold horse riding, I'm not even sure I fully understood the cow thing, but it sounded really impressive. With this bold attitude that you have, and this really impressive and thorough, effective process, you are now taking on immigration, I understand, which, of course, has always been an incredibly challenging, polarizing, charged issue. And certainly in 2026 so far I can't overstate how charged of an issue it is. And so you're taking that on. Why immigration, and where do you see the opportunities there?
Yeah, Brandyn, I rarely in my life have I thought, you might have overshot here. Maybe
You've gone too far.
immigration, it is just phenomenally difficult. I mean, as you say, our politics are deeply troubled and divided anyway. But it'd be hard to find an issue or which that's more true than immigration, particularly as you're saying in recent months. So it is a very difficult issue. But that was, we had fairly extensive conversations with the membership, and this 4-for-4 track record. And I never in a million years dreamed that we would be victorious on the first 4 issues that we took on. It is just totally amazing to me. I sometimes worry we've given our membership kind of unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, well, it's a perfect record is a pretty high expectation. Yeah.
So, but we talked a lot about, just how ambitious should we get. It has always been our vision that as we developed a track record and a reputation, that we take on increasingly difficult and consequential issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so, after the 4th victory, we had, a series of national Zoom meetings where we kind of discussed this. And it was the overwhelming consensus of the membership that they wanted to take on something more consequential. And not that the issues that we'd already taken on weren't very, very consequential, but a willingness to take on tougher issues politically, more complex issues, and that our members really feel empowered and they really have a sense of confidence. And seeing just how difficult this issue is and how much it's tearing apart the country, they're like, well, who else is going to step up on this? We need to do it.
Yeah, fantastic. So are there particular things that you're anticipating are going to be especially tough about the issue? And are there particular sort of openings for progress or for getting something done that you're also looking at? Can you help us understand how you're thinking about it, both in terms of the challenges and the opportunities?
Yeah, I'd say where I'm most optimistic that Congress could act in the near future, beyond the, there's the kind of issues of the moment that are driven by, to this point, executive actions and, what we do with ICE, et cetera. Those are difficult. I think there may be some progress. There's a growing bipartisan consensus of some changes to make there. But if we take the longer view, really what you need is kind of a 3-legged stool for sound immigration policy. So one is you've got to be able to secure the border and, so that you can make rational decisions, that it's not other people making the decision about who can come into the country, but that we're making a rational decision. And 2, you've got to be able to have interior enforcement to kind of keep that true. And we're going to have to figure out what to do with the about 14 million folks who are already here and without being documented.
Mm-hmm.
Some of whom are not playing by the rules and are criminals, but many of which are making really quite positive contributions to the country. So how do we sort through that? It's the second stool. And then the third stool is to have work on the legal pathways to immigration. So I just, in a meeting on Capitol Hill yesterday, I heard someone describe it as we need to have tall fences and wide gates. And
interesting. Yeah.
Instead of a kind of willy-nilly and people being trafficked across by cartels, say, let's take these ports of entry and let's really open up the routes to come in legally and make it, rational decisions about who should be allowed to come in and who shouldn't. And so I think that legal pathways to immigration. Current policy is a real mess. It has not been updated since for about 30 years, and so
Right.
and it's not suited to meet our needs currently of who we want coming in and who we don't. And so I think that's probably the easiest place to get action, and it's not one that really tilts left or right so obviously. And so I suspect that what may happen is that becomes the kind of fulcrum, the catalyst around which bipartisan consensus is achieved in the first instance. And then from that, you kind of build out and say, what else can we do that will broaden support rather than shrink it? And so that's going to have to be probably some combination of, deporting the worst of those who are here in an undocumented way, but figuring out some sort of appropriate status for those who have been here for years, been paying taxes, have not had any criminal. So there's probably going to have to be something like that. I think that, Dreamers are the kind of most obvious piece where you can imagine bipartisan consensus coming, that they would have status that the bipartisan consensus does not exist yet,
Right.
but it feels like it's moving that direction. And then on the other side, that we've got to do the border security and interior enforcement. People think that that's the Trump administration has been successful at almost totally shutting down encounters at the southern border and securing the border. But, the big, beautiful bill was a budget bill. So it's really just funding. It's not long-term policy. And so that can go away as soon as President Trump goes away. And so I think there's a recognition that we've got to do something legislatively to keep some sane system in place of the tall fences as we open up wider gates.
Well, it sounds like a lot for your Common Sense American participants to dig their teeth into, and something that could be extremely consequential for everyday Americans across the country. So kudos for taking on that challenging mission. And Keith, our time has absolutely flown by. Two more quick questions for you. First one is, for folks who have been listening and are kind of like, yeah, this sounds good, but I still just feel like I'm screaming into the void when I'm trying to make a difference, or maybe don't even know where to begin. Is there some encouragement or ray of hope that what would you say to those folks?
Well, one thing is join Common Sense American, and in 1 hour per year, you can have a profound impact. And again, it's not us seeing that. We have the track record to show it. We have had this group of, and the membership's been growing fast. So the first victory, we had maybe 10,000 members, and we got that. So it's been growing. But I will make this bold claim that there is nothing everyday citizens can do right now that is easier and more powerful for helping Congress function better than joining Common Sense American. By committing 1 hour per year and sharing your view, you can make a real difference. We have demonstrated that. We've got the receipts to show for that. So certainly, really hope people will join. We, the American people, will have to be our saving grace if we're going to get to a better place, less divided and less bitter than our elected officials. And if we just cede the stage to the extremes, then we're going to get extreme politics. So we as everyday citizens are going to have to step up. And what we've developed at Common Sense American is a way for you to step up that's not going to consume your life, just 1 hour per year at a time and place that's convenient to you for you to register your views. We'll collect that up with thousands of other Americans and engage Congress in a powerful way. So that I think is truly a powerful way of doing it. The second thing that I'd recommend that people can kind of just do individually is to discover in your own personal relationships that we're not actually as divided on the issues as people think. And often the trick there is to get just a little more concrete
Mm-hmm.
than superficial. But if you dig and just have a conversation with someone that you've got kind of different political views with, say, we're told that we're just hopelessly divided on this issue, but I wonder if there's not some common ground, and let's see if we can find some common ground on that, and it'll give you and whoever you're talking to a little more hope that maybe things aren't as bad as they seem.
Absolutely. Scratching the surface, channeling some of our Keith Allred boldness, and who knows what we might find under the surface. You heard it here, folks. Common Sense American. Click the link below. 1 hour a year to make a huge difference. And check out the site generally. We'll also have other ways to connect with Keith and NICD, National Institute for Civil Discourse, in the description below as well. So thanks so much, Keith. It's been wonderful to chat with you. We hope we'll get to have you back in again, and really hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Brandyn. Really good to talk with you.
Absolutely. And we'll see you next time, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And so good to see you, Keith. It's been so long.